Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam, Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, Salam Kebajikan. Good morning, distinguished guests, speakers, moderators, presenters, and participants.
Recording in
Selamat
progress.
pagi, Bapak Ibu sekalian. Welcome back to the second day of the International Conference on Humanities, Education, Languages, and Cultures, hosted virtually by the Faculty of Teacher Training in Education, Universitas Katolik Indonesia Santu Paulus Ruteng. My name is Santu Salum, and I am delighted to be your Master of Ceremonies for today's sessions. Ladies and gentlemen, we had a very engaging and insightful first day yesterday, and we look forward to another day filled with stimulating presentations and discussions under the conference theme, Transforming Humanities Education through Technology, Language, Cultural, and Spiritual Values to promote sustainable societies in the digital age. Today's agenda features two more distinguished keynote speakers, followed by our afternoon parallel presentation sessions. Ladies and gentlemen, let us begin today's program. To start our second day with reflection and blessings, let us unite in an opening prayer. The prayer will be led by Miss Maria Olga Jelimun.
Ladies and gentlemen, let us bow our heads to start this conference by prayer. Let me lead this prayer in Catholic faith. In the name of the Father, of the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Heavenly Father, good morning. Again, we come before you with grateful hearts as we gather from many nations and cultures for these second days of international conference. Thank you again for this opportunity to meet and learn and work together with our keynote speakers and all the presenters around the world. Lord, send your Holy Spirit to guide our discussions and enlighten our minds and open our heart to one and another. May this conference be a space of our collaborations and understanding and growth together. So we glorify your name now and forever. Amen. In the name of the Father, of the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, we will now commence to our first keynote session for today's keynote session 3. It is my honor to introduce the moderator for this session, Mr. Indra Susanto M. Tesol. Mr. Susanto will introduce our esteemed keynote speaker and facilitate the discussion. To Mr. Indra Susanto, the screen is yours.
distinguished guests, speakers, participants, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It is my distinct pleasure to introduce our next esteemed keynote speaker, Dr. Ania Lian. Please allow me to read her amazing bio. Dr. Lian is a senior staff member at the International Graduate Center of Education within the College of Education at the Charles Darwin University, Australia. She plays a vital role in coordinating the Masters in Education course and fostering a robust culture for higher degree research supervision, significantly building student capacity. Furthermore, Dr. Lian actively develops international collaborations, particularly with institutions across Southeast Asia, including our home, Indonesia. Dr. Lian possesses a high international profile in key areas directly relevant to our conference today, including computer-assisted language learning, innovative student-centered language pedagogies, and enhancing English literacy and academic writing skills. Her research also extends into quality assurance in higher education curricula. She is known for her innovative work, including developing novel methods linking neuroscience and COL to support academic writing and exploring reading for emotion techniques to bolster language and literacy development. Today with us, Dr. Lian will enlighten us with her presentation titled Reframing Literacy in the Digital Age, Language, Emotion, and Cultural Agency for Sustainable and Inclusive Learning. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in giving a warm virtual welcome to Dr. Ania Lian. Dr. Lian, the screen is yours.
Good morning to the participants.
Hello.
I'm very grateful for the invitation, and I would really want to thank the organizers for thinking of me as one of the keynote speakers, especially since I'm sharing the stage or the screen with so many esteemed professors here. I would like to now excuse myself for the background of my Zoom. I never knew I had that. And it's too risky to make any changes at this very moment. But if I can say it, I am Vice President of AsiaCol, and we sign research memoranda with different universities in order to strengthen research capacity in different countries and universities. Am I able to upload my PowerPoint?
Yes, doctor. You might share your screen by yourselves, or do you want us to?
I'm just thinking how to share the screen. I'm clicking on share. And okay, I got that. We might get back to the beginning.
Yeah. Now we
Which
can
would
see
be
your
very
screen,
helpful.
doctor.
Yes, thank you. So once again, thank you very much for the invitation. Well, some views that I will discuss today truly are mine. Some views, as I will explain soon, are not mine, but for some reason they have been lost in the sea of publications and in a hurry for compliance with new trends and the need for innovation. Hence the concept of reframing. I am of no way I'm of the caliber of people like Pierre Bourdieu that I will be talking about today, or people like him. I'm just Dr. Anya Lyon, and I will just show to you my little contribution to the concept of reframing literacy, and especially literacy in the context of language learning, but not only, also in Australia as we teach it in our schools. Obviously, by the time you grow old, you've got debts. And most of those debts you would think would be towards the biggest scholars that are there. And that may be so. I would like to definitely mention Professor Andrew Lyon, who is the Vice President of Asia Call. Certainly, he had a great impact on my development and thinking. But by the time you grow old, you owe a lot to your doctoral and research master students because they work with you, they do the work that you not necessarily always have the time to do. And sometimes when you work with a student, and that's the importance of research students, sometimes when you work with a student from the perspective that interests you, you wouldn't have thought about it. And it opens up a new dimension on things that you thought you already understood well. Oh, I was told by Lala Bumela Sudimantara from Cirebon to advertise our book that is coming out in May, so people can actually so libraries can actually request them already, pre-order them. Is everybody hearing me? Because for some reason I'm getting... Anyway, is everybody hearing me?
Yeah, we can hear you clear, doctor. Yes, we can hear your voice clear, doctor.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
The book is a summary of a multitude of concepts that I will talk about today, but obviously I'm taking it a few steps forward. So the reason why I'm very grateful to the conference organizers, because what they did, they gave me space to actually discuss my work in a greater detail, which often I just don't have the time to do. And also because it focuses on culture, it focuses on humanity, on language, it gives me an opportunity to flesh out some concepts that I believe are fundamental to the job of literacy and language teaching. And as I mentioned before, I think they just sort of got lost. We just think that this is my personal view, and I'm very sorry if you share with me those views, that's great. If you don't, then maybe I can actually trigger in you something, or you may think differently and position yourself against that. So I think personally that yes, we need some clarification. So reconceptualizing literacy, what will it take? Talking a bit of theory, clarifying concepts, talking about the meaning of the new change in our global curricula and what it all means to your neighbor. Right? I think too often our schools are like isolated jails outside of the community, and most of the time a lot of people have no idea what's happening there. And in Australia, we're currently suffering of behavioral issues in classroom. There would be many reasons for it, I don't deny it, but one of them is that our students, if they don't perform or don't engage, they don't lose face. School is outside of the social market, which means they can do in the classroom whatever, and nobody knows, other than a distressed teacher who barely can cope. My transitions are very slow. I didn't notice that before. So I will talk also, I'll show you some examples of implications of my views. I will also show you the kinds of support that I think that today with AI especially, we can actually create. So in the world is in flux, technological advances, neuroscientific insights, pluralism, and so on offer us opportunities. And yet I have noticed myself, but not only, in Australia, we are regressing in our policies. We're regressing in our educational values. And I would like to actually suggest that the reason for it is that we have undervalued the concept of change and what it means to change. I was saying these things 13 years ago when people were thinking that curriculum change towards competence-based education was just managerialism. It will always be what you make it. And unfortunately, we have turned it into managerialism. So in literacy education, most of you already are very fluent in the method which is called the genre-based teaching approach, or based on systemic functional linguistics. There's been a criticism for decades of the method, basically on many grounds, but all pointing to the fact, like this author here of children's stories, Michael Rosen, expresses, that students, when they are exposed to the approach of genre teaching, they do not learn to write. They basically do exercises in classroom. And what he's saying, doing exercises is not necessary as reflecting on how to write for a desired impact, which is real, because it's actually to communicate with others, not just with your teacher and for the sake of getting a grade. So all good, and as you can see, I sort of go through life. I have these doctoral students, I develop my own models and all of this, and then I get a request from Indonesia, look, we've done this research, could you please help us publish it? Which I did. And again, in this publication, I'm not sure, it's a little bit, I'm not sure whether it's complex, this publication, too complex. But what I did, how I structured that and focused this, is to indicate that yes, our students or pre-service teachers have anxiety on school practicum, but it's not necessarily because it was online. It's not necessarily because they are little. They are not prepared. And they are not prepared because we're lacking conceptual clarity in our teacher education courses. Now, I need to say that I am backing up my statement not just by my own observations, by a multitude of research conducted by not just by myself, but my students. Unfortunately, academics are very gentle about that criticism, and very often when they interview teachers, and because the teachers volunteered information, they are very gentle about assessing what the information they get. But it's very clear. Teachers in Australia and in Indonesia, because I just recently also assessed someone's doctoral thesis on a similar subject, do not know how to talk about their job. They do not have the concepts to conduct what in Australian policies is called reflective practice. If you do not have concepts, all you have is emotions. I hate that, I like that, he's bad, she's good. Yeah. So in that publication, and based on a PhD also of my student Lala Bumala Sudimantera from Cirebon, I lifted from his thesis how he summarized in his literature review the kind of framework that the Indonesian scholar Professor Widodo constructed in 2016, just about 10 years ago. How the shift towards the competency-based transformative pedagogy changes the discipline of teaching English and teaching English literacy in Indonesia and honestly everywhere, but especially he spoke about Indonesia. And I'm not here to discuss it because I don't have the time, but look at the concepts. All of us know these concepts. Students are interactive, integrated, which means things relate and reinforce one another. The learnings reinforce one another. They are not isolated islands. Learning is exploratory. Why? Do we know why? We feel it's good. Now, feeling is not good enough because in Australia currently, the neuroscience literature that talks about that the only time your eyes and your mind is not exploring is when you are in coma or dead. We have an emotional circuit called seeking circuit, and it goes around all the time, all the time, all the time. It is a basis of our living. It is a basis of, it's actually like our guardian that makes sure we always get new information and we survive. Right? We need to look into that literature. We can't just say, oh, it just sort of makes sense. No, because today in Australia, we have policies which are about explicit teaching, which support teacher-centered pedagogy. Now, you can obviously go on that bandwagon and run with it, or you can actually explore. Why exploratory? And why not? Why not is based on one little observation in 1956 in a psychology paper, which was interesting, a curiosity, but to base the entire policy of Australia on one curiosity is a little bit regressive, so to speak. Students' needs, what does it mean? Interdisciplinary approaches to our thinking, what does that mean? So I'll try to clarify all these things as we're going. So Widodo also was here in this table, presents how we move from more literal to more transformative, exploratory, and in making connections, pedagogies making connections between ourselves and the world. Now, those values are explicitly stated in OECD policies 20 years ago, 2005. They are also stated in Partnership for 21st Century Learning. So you might actually have a look. These were the policies that were education policies that were setting up the base for all the reforms that have undergone all over the world, or at least the democratic world, including Indonesia and Australia. So before I would sort of go to education, and I'm keeping my eye on time, I would like to introduce to you the concept of capital, because language and culture function in our social spaces, individual spaces and social spaces. And Pierre Bourdieu, French sociologist who I think died in 1994, so a long time ago, he's written a lot. And I think that his work sort of, again, got sort of lost. Who is reading Bourdieu today? So the concept of capital has a market reference, and it refers to space and it refers to value. But what Pierre Bourdieu showed is that the space and value are not constant, because the rules of that, the limits or the boundaries of the space and the values are not written on the sky with capital letters. Individuals shape them. So now Bourdieu produced for us a framework and research tools in the form of this capital for thinking about how our culture changes as individuals encounter one another and modify the values that rule particular marketplaces, like, for example, education. Right? So at least in terms of policy, we shouldn't be making sure that language learning is all about reciting all grammar rules, right? That has changed, right? So different researchers from neuroscience, from psychology, from linguistics contributed and reshaped the space. So let me talk to you about identity and culture, which are strong concepts that are central to teaching literacy and to teaching languages. So identity and culture are not external attributes, but are internalized. So here's the subjective dimension. It is in my head. I could be presenting here for an hour thinking that you hear me, but unless I confirm with you, co-construct with you what's in my head, I will be talking to myself. So that's why I ask, can you still hear me? Right, so identity and cultures are not external, but are internalized, co-constructed dimensions of experience. Now, when you talk about spaces, we co-construct spaces, as I explained. So, for example, does King Charles II determined who is the teacher in Australia. Maybe, but not in a very direct way. In a direct way, it's the policies, which means the taxpayers, which means all the regulations, certifications. At the end of the day, the field of education through different policies puts a stamp on your head and says you're a teacher. You're allowed to teach. You're allowed to function in the space of education when it comes to schools. But there's this internalized also dimension, the subjective dimension. All good. But how will you understand that? How will you engage in that space? Right? So there's your responsibility and your possibilities. So I would like to really point out to you that the social doesn't live without the individual, and in fact depends on the individual. That's how the social changes. And what I'm saying here, that since 2000, when did I? 2001, when people who are into dialogic social Vygotsky learning wrote to me, and they were unknowns back then, and they wrote to me a letter asking me what I think of those concepts. And when I told them, I never heard of them again, because they were sitting there on their narrow interpretation of what dialogic Vygotsky-based learning means, and they didn't want to go beyond that. All they needed to do is to accumulate around themselves enough of people that will speak with the same voice. And that's how other readings, other amazing people like Pierre Bourdieu, whoever else is there, Anne Friedman, who knows who is Professor Anne Friedman from Melbourne, right? All these voices just got squashed because 10 million publications just use Vygotsky. Every time they say the concept social, they put Vygotsky's reference next to it, as if he owned that word. But we have ourselves only. The cultural, the social is made of a multiplicity of our contributions we make to this society. We must never ever lose the sight of the individual, because we then turn people into cogs in the machine. We dehumanize everybody in the system, not just students, right? If you are a lecturer or a teacher and you made it, you may not worry about students, but the system dehumanizes you. So the capitals that individuals draw upon, cultural, social, economic, and that impact capital, it's my invention. I'm not going to talk about it today. It is very new. That's 2 months old. Do not merely define external structures, they are internalized maps of value and possibility. I'm participating today, right? I'm bringing my own little thing. Hopefully that one or two of you will sort of take one thing out of it and see what to do with it. So these maps do not refer to physical terrains through which individuals move. Oh, there's education, and now we walk through education, and we have to acquire all of it. But a mental and emotional territories shaped by past interactions and future aspirations. Where to? Where to from here? So individuals in those spaces carry these maps within themselves, navigating reflexively the capitals they represent, while encountering others like you, me, you, who carry their own configurations of capital. Through the friction and discussions, the field changes. We recalibrate not just our own selves, but also the field. Now, I talk about interdisciplinary integration of interdisciplinary knowledges. And this morning, before I gave a talk, this talk, and before I even finalized my presentation, I needed to relax. So I'm listening to the first video that popped up on my selection is Professor Michael Levin, the hottest biologist on the planet currently, or at least the most prominent. He makes frogs that lost their arm and leg regrow their limbs. Very interesting. And he talks about learning. And his thinking, which is based on biology, aligns with the ideas from sociology, from semiotics and cultural studies that I presented thus far. So he sees learning at the level of cell, an individual, as a forward-looking, self-constructive process. So a forward-looking, relating to the space. How better? What else can I do to breathe better? Asks the cell. Self-constructive, my own engagement in that space. So if a cell gets it wrong, it dies. Isn't it interesting? It's a very short lecture. You can actually download the script. You can download the script, upload it to ChatGPT, ask the ChatGPT to summarize it or actually transcribe it, then summarize the key points, and you can actually discuss with ChatGPT what what all of this means. Very interesting. So the Australian curriculum actually captures the concepts of capital and the concepts of transformative learning in what it calls the general capabilities of learning. And it has what I consider 4 of them, because it's critical and creative, personal and social, ethical and intercultural. I will discuss them shortly, just to show you how the social and subjective intersect in relation to these learning capabilities. Now, in education, in Australia, there's a huge confusion about those capabilities. Increasingly, teachers are asking for very clear definitions of these terms. Well, I'm not surprised that teachers ask for clear definitions, but what I'm surprised is that professors write articles where they say, well, maybe we should get rid of those capabilities because we cannot produce definitions. Nobody is considering the fact that maybe we could research, engage in theorizing those capabilities, and then maybe open up spaces for pedagogy and research, which is exactly what I've done with a student of mine, Amy Norman, in 2017. And obviously now I present to you a few understandings which are expanded. So in the Australian curriculum, the idea is as follows. You do not teach mathematics, physics, and biology. You teach the general learning capabilities. You want your students to be aware, to have cultural and ethical understandings, and also to actually be critical thinkers. And you teach those capabilities by drawing on themes, Asian, Australian, Aboriginal, while engaging discipline-specific learning outcomes. So you've got this 3-dimensional structure of the Australian curriculum. And for some reason, it is extremely difficult for people to say that, to see it, to work with it, and to teach it in initial teacher education courses. I do not understand why it's so hard, but it is very difficult. So let us look at the personal and social learning capabilities. They are about building self and social awareness. So the way I talk about it is these specific capabilities foreground the inherently relational and transformative nature of learning, where identity, emotion, how I feel, is a process of learning, identity, who I am, the process of learning, emotional relationship to who I am and the world, and cognition, my understandings, they intersect, right? So who I am, how I feel about myself and the relationship, myself in the world, and what I know, how these things intersect. So Imordino Young, very famous professor in neuroscience and education, further elaborated by Lyon and whatever. This capability, she says, acknowledges that individuals do not simply observe the world. Remember, as I speak, relate to what you know about pedagogy. Do you show to students how the world is? Then you turn them into observers. I'm not saying not to show, but that's only 10% of pedagogy. So relate what you know to what I'm saying. So individuals do not simply observe the world, they internalize it. you know more about this, about yourself in the world inside of you than you can articulate. In fact, most people cannot articulate much, but they still are fully functional and do not trip over every 5 seconds as they walk, right? So we've internalized a lot of understandings, which is not to say the same that, and that's how these understandings become us. This internalization involves dynamically reconstructing the beliefs, goals, emotions, and actions of others. I internalize my subjective interpretations of the goals that inform other people's actions. I internalize. Your children do it. That's how by the age of 5, they're pretty good by then, right? So through subjective, emotionally charged interpretation, good, bad, relevant, sad, joyful, interesting, curious. So these are not passive processes. By anchoring the personal and social learning capabilities in a neuroscience-informed relational framework, relational, subjective, objective, education moves, or at least has a chance to move beyond functionalist or behaviorist models. Yet I have seen in that paper that I was writing with my colleagues from Indonesia, today we will be studying the phrases for ordering beer, for ordering beef, for ordering breakfast, highly functionalist. I'm not saying that as a drill it is bad, but per se as a lesson where these kind of objectives and lesson plans of this kind don't allow students to sort of integrate it into their own life in a way that actually helps them to make a difference in the world. It's problematic. And that's what they were teaching those students. No wonder they were anxious, because nobody could relate. No, it's not because they spoke in Indonesian. It's not because they spoke in English. It's because the kids couldn't relate to that. They didn't know what to do with that cup of tea. So it becomes a transformative practice because of that sort of framing. One that equips students with the internal resources to navigate difference, uncertainty, and change. If you study policy and if you're a mentor and supervisor, or if you do research, you've seen these concepts before. Difference, uncertainty, change. But you need to have tools. You need to have tools. What tools do we give our students? Functions, how to order chicken, while developing a grounded and responsive sense of self within a social world. Transformative practice signifies a critical departure from traditional models of education that treat society as an abstract system. Once you know how to order things, you're good to go. Detached from lived experiences, I would just produce that lesson for everybody. It should be good for everybody. It's like a dictionary. Why not just give them a dictionary? And internal worlds of learners. It reorients the focus towards agency. Again, Jack Panksepp has died, but talks about how you are emotionally constructed, that the seeking emotional circuit is central to your behavior. Seeking means agency, foregrounding the learner not as a passive recipient. I'm not here to swallow functions of how to order beer or chicken. So foregrounding the learner not as a passive recipient of cultural norms or societal roles, but as an active meaning maker. We all heard about active meaning maker. Oh yeah, our student is a meaning maker. I read it in every publication. I have no idea, but people don't define it. They don't look for concepts outside of just regurgitating the common sense bandwagon. A person who internalizes, that's what student is, interprets, negotiates, and transforms the world from within. I can only engage with what I have. I can move past that. So now when it comes to ethical and intercultural learning capabilities, I will be short here. So intercultural learning is not about acquiring otherness. So there's an Indonesian culture, there's the Australian culture. People absolutely misread or misunderstand the concept of culture. Intercultural learning is not about acquiring otherness, nor about confronting an externalized notion of culture, as if it were a stable, homogeneous system. All Indonesians are the same. Doesn't matter whom you marry. Just pick one girl next door, next man, right? Just go to it, and you can do any job. I mean, after all, everything is the same. Rather, this capability involves the exploration of contrast, the emotional and cognitive dissonances that arise when one's internalized sense of self, shaped by my personal and cultural capitals, meets alternative ways of being, knowing, and valuing. So you're raised by your parents, you're 5, 6 years old, you visit your friend, and they cook differently, they do other things differently, and what do you say? You tell them they're wrong? You're learning, you're confronting this, you compare with what you have in you, what you understand. You explore limitations of your knowledge, but the concept of cooking is helpful for you to understand that these people are also cooking, but differently. So you use what you know in order to reshape what you know. That's intercultural learning. So students do not confront culture as an object outside themselves. They confront the limits and assumptions of their own frameworks as those frameworks become visible, often uncomfortably so, through encounters with difference. It is in this affective space of friction, of emotional disruption and cognitive realignment that ethical and intercultural learning begins. So critical and creative thinking, I will be short here because I want to go more into now implications, emerges when students are prompted to recounter what they already know, but now in unfamiliar ways. It is not the presence of novel inputs, which is what Krashen says to you, or even how people interpret Vygotsky, or maybe Vygotsky says it himself, or just give them the next thing that matters. Now, it is not the presence of novel inputs that generates insight, but the activation of contrast, of contradictions within learners' existing systems of beliefs, experiences, and emotional investments. Create ambiguity, make them think. What is it that they know? Now, I've said it once in a course when I was teaching to do that. And I was called, that it was like 30 years ago, and I was called into the office by the then professor, and she said, you said you don't want to give children clarity, you want to give them ambiguity. No, I just want them to think. A 5-year-old can think. In fact, research shows that 3-month-old children, infants, already think critically. So on the bottom, thinking becomes a creative act of reconfiguration, not simply retrieval and reapplication. But just think about it, how you teach, what you know about what people write in publications, and see how all of this relates. So critical thinking, did you see it? It's not about having the answer, it's actually asking better questions, right? And as they generate new configurations of meaning, it invites them not just to answer questions, but to ask better ones, to detect patterns and discontinuities. Oh, that doesn't work here, that finishes here, this is good up to here, but not there. To construct meaning not from certainty, but from the creative tension between known and unknown, familiar and strange. Sounds poetic. I must say that I use a little bit of ChatGPT to get these amazing phrasings, but that's what it is. Okay, so basically what we have a few concepts here. I will just point to you. Approach, role of a teacher, role of a student, and what is learning. Hopefully I can cover them in under 3 seconds. So we talked about approach is transformative. Learning occurs when internal dissonance activates a reorganization of meaning. The role of a teacher is not to guide from here to the promised land. It is to support students in moving in the direction that they find or identify as empowering. And the role of a students are not vessels, but agents of reconstructions. They are motivated by their goals. So what did we do? A million years ago, literally before when the internet was literally in its infancy, a student of mine created this Thai news network. So the university gave them an IT person, and we designed a project for the students. It was first-year students in Konkan University. And what they did, they engaged in the project, which we named together Thai News Network, right? And what they did, they, in order to learn literacy skills, critical thinking, that's what they thought. We knew they're gonna learn more, and they did. The idea was to populate this website, which didn't have what we see here. Well, it had spaces, but nothing was in it, to populate the space with articles about whatever they would decide to write about. So basically what students decided is, and with the teacher, is to divide into groups of 3, take about 2 weeks to produce a story, and within a semester or so, they would produce, say, 5 stories. I don't remember anymore in detail. But the students did other things. So one of the things we did, we created a space which allowed us to actually engage the community, university, and the Konkan city as well. So that was a space where people who read those stories on the website could comment on those stories, could provide alternative views, could provide their views of students' writing. I'm just saying because that's what they did. Could actually help, whereas they could find more information and so on. Students did other things. They started producing advertisements of Konkan University, what the Konkan University offers to the community, the mobile library, the child services, the English language services. It was amazing. The project, as you can see on the left, was this whole experiment was conducted by Dr. Maliwan Burapatana. So she actually started with me in the year 2000. I think she did the project in 2001. By 2006, she graduated. So you can see this as a project-based learning, and that's correct. But what the project actually stimulated was getting the stories. Where do you get the story? Where do journalists get a story? They had to have all these discussions. Well, the journalists get stories from the community. First-year students in Konkan University wouldn't go to the community, to peasants and other people to get a story. Well, they did. They learned how to introduce themselves, how to get stories, how to bring stories back to the community, to people who didn't speak, couldn't read and write. Okay, so I don't have much more time for that. You could do that exactly, and I'll tell you why soon. So here, attitudes change. This is data from the project. And now read more. My parents are surprised that this 19-year-old's writing, that I have changed in this way. I watch, I read, I think. Well, that's attitude. I didn't put all the data, obviously. Community, we went to see people who work for NGOs in town, right? They never knew they existed. They went to libraries, they went to, I don't know, they discussed lots of things. They did go to peasants. They actually also engaged professors from the university. Some professors actually came to give them a story, which was interesting. Now, this is interesting. Working in a group made me more mature. You see how this personal and social awareness is coming through? And also the intercultural and ethical awarenesses are coming through, or capabilities. You learned about other people. I had to listen to other people's opinions. So this is the cultural friction started coming, not only between them and learning about what other people do, but between one another. These friendly Buddhist students in Konkan University do have a dark streak like all of us. They didn't like each other. Sometimes they were in the groups with people they didn't want to work with them. But what we did is, it is what I just mentioned in the beginning of my keynote today, was that we advertised the project all around Konkan, all around university. That project was not owned by the students or by my PhD student, was owned by the community. The community knew that on the 5th of April, articles are gonna come in, and they were ready to read on the website. If you didn't, your name was there. Sometimes we would, in due course, we would put the title of your article, right? Your name was there, the date of publication was there. The community wanted to know. They were the newspaper of the community from the perspective of young people. If you didn't, people were disappointed. People knew, and in some way, you lost face. Well, they wrote, and they learned to respect each other, to work in groups, bypass little personal differences, and become professional. Right, I worked hard, but I felt proud once it was done. So support, let me talk about support in the world of AI. What's very interesting, I work a lot with AI systems because, well, it started actually because English is not my first language, and maybe most of you can relate to it. Sure, I can finish the publication without using AI. Obviously, I've done it before AI happened. I've written I've written PhD thesis, master by research thesis. I've written honors thesis. My honors thesis was in German, and I'm Polish by birth. So that was just the beginning, and publications afterwards. But AI is very helpful, and I'll show you soon why. So if you check this particular blog post in a national education blog website, what you will find out that a research that I done with my master student, Annelies Paul, what we did there, we actually did a conceptual reframing of the assessment guidelines used in Australia in this national test of literacy. And also these assessment guidelines motivate how teachers teach literacy in classrooms. What we found, obviously we had a framework, and I'll talk about it. What we found, that there's no internal coherence among these assessment criteria that we use in Australia. Well, little we knew, later on we found out that at the level of government, they knew it. They just weren't doing anything about it. So there was multi-million-dollar report written in 2020 saying this, in 2022, in 2023, nothing was done about it. So you can see how the NAPLAN approach, if you look at their methodology, it is all, you really have to run with a sort of like a paper with a list of things. Do you engage the reader? And it involves subjective evaluation. And the next one, text structure. Do you have orientation complication? Do you have presence of ideas? Yeah, you have some ideas in your text. I'm a little bit sarcastic because not because someone conceptualized them, but because lack of conceptualization is present in those things, and yet they are the law of literacy in Australia. And I don't know why it takes Anya Lyon and my students to actually look into it. but look at the reading for emotion model. So that was sort of signaled in the introduction from my bio note today. I will talk about it later, but let's look at it. It is about how the audience, how the writer intends to affect the reader. Affect. What's the desired goal? How the writer intends to affect reader. Obviously, I cannot go into detail about the method, but we have actually designed the method how to actually do assessment. But where's the coherence coming from? So the first one is about emotions. The second one is emotional stages, whether they progress together in order to create a cohesive emotional journey. Again, emotion. About ideas, assess how ideas contribute to emotional impact and whether they sustain the reader's engagement. Right? So throughout each category, you can see that the concept of emotion is reoccurring. It gives so basically each criterion positions our method in a different angle. We check different things, but we continuously check how emotionally sound these categories or these criteria are integrated or realized or manifest in students' texts. Why emotion? Clearly neuroscience, but I may or may not. We found an enormous amount of qualitative differences or points of in critique of students' work. So NAPLAN examiners, they looked at students' NAPLAN stories and they produced their evaluation of those stories. And my student and I published how qualitatively different, rich, and also systematic that critique was when we applied our reading for emotion model. Incomparably, qualitatively better. So that's what I want to say here. Again, so the reading for emotion model, it has its evolution. So the first time I wrote about it, it just came to me in 2015. I published that in a refereed conference proceedings, which the conference happened in New Zealand. So 2017, it was just the beginning of the model, and I thought back then it was the end of it, but no. So basically, texts guide the reader through an emotional journey and it doesn't matter, it could be a stop sign. When you see a stop sign, you have an emotional journey. If you don't go through, it's the moral. If you don't stop, you're gonna die or damage your car or both, right? So all texts guide the reader through an emotional journey where meaning, the impact on the reader, emerges from shifts in emotional tone. I'll show you this, how it looks like. So coherence comes from emotional momentum. Think of a movie, slow, problem, and then story, right? And all of this is emotionally guided. That's why you like or dislike the movie. I'm also using Ramachandran and Hirschman aesthetic principles. So we had amazing results. So you can find it in the book that I flagged in the beginning, or just you can see how in both studies, SFL students absolutely didn't improve in academic writing or just writing in any statistically relevant manner, but our students using RFE model skyrocketed. Interesting. And these experiments were taught by my students who are not me, right? I sort of had guest appearances sometimes, but so when you read a fable, so at initial teacher, so our pre-service teachers are taught you should read to children, you should model reading. So everybody now realize on their own intuitive understanding what it means. But what it means, first you introduce in a field one summer's day, and then you introduce a problem, and an end pass by. right? So you change the tone. Why do you change tone? Because there's an emotional shift from a happy grasshopper to something is changing. And then they have a discussion. So it's sort of like tumultuous friction. And then something happens, like mysteriously, and goes away. And you sort of worry what will happen. Then you know what happened, grasshopper dies, and then you have a moral. So text indeed takes the reader through emotional journey. Now, these people ask me, where do I get these from? PhD thesis. Focus, introduction, disturbance, problem statement, dialogue, literature review, development. So what happened next? Resolution. Tell me your findings. Moral. Well, what did we learn? Applies to all texts, even a recipe. Now, if you employ ChatGPT, all you have to do is to do a primitive analysis of one or two texts yourself by hand with your English, like my English, and then ChatGPT will spit out and learn its own way of analyzing text. As Mr. McNoy, who is the Director General of Higher Education in Cambodia, said, AI may not be intelligent, but it's accurate. Human beings are not accurate, but they are intelligent. It was an amazing statement. I work in it. Andrew Lyon works in it, Professor Andrew Lyon. And he didn't say it, or maybe he thought it, but he didn't say it. Mr. McNoy said it, right? And when you, Mr. McNoy, not Mr. McNoy, AI will spit out to you this analysis. Now, what do you do with it? I'm running very quickly through my concept so that you can actually see just where it is going. As a teacher, you think you speak Indonesian, you think you speak English, you think you speak whatever language. We don't. Our articulation levels are low. Your preparation of resources for classroom in order to model model emotional analysis of text so that students can look at their own text that they produce, say, for Chinese network, and they can evaluate themselves in it, also using ChatGPT. But the good thing is, first, you want to discuss with children, with students, how I speak about children because I just had a student who is just passed the examination, and her thesis was on early childhood. So you want to create a discussion, and you want to start actually to lead that discussion. You have to have questions. Then you want to introduce some vocabulary which is sophisticated, enables students to actually think about different dimensions and have a word for it so that they build their articulation levels. Now, it's very hard if you don't have those words, or if you can't think of everything. ChatGPT will produce for you this. You can study this, think about it. And then when you lead the discussion with students on their own text, or maybe on this text as an example, you have now a broader view of the things that are involved in this text than if you did just use your own handwritten analysis of that fable or some other text. Amazing things ChatGPT produces. Now, obviously, there are other values of my model, like coherence. I just don't have time to talk about it. Now, you can do other things with students, pick up text, like I did here. I'm just using this example. And you remove from the text, you remove from the text the things that don't have to be in the sentence for the sentence to be grammatical. And then you find out what literary devices authors are using to actually create that effect on the reader. And if you think that these discussions are simple and students actually can answer those questions, now I actually was teaching teachers, pre-service teachers in Australia, and they were all Australian. They didn't know why the story begins with "in a field." This is all sped out by ChatGPT. You can see how nicely it is organized and so on. So in a field, so if it is about northern hemisphere, field is tricky because sometimes it's warm and you have a picnic in a field, but sometimes it's freezing and it's raining and it's muddy and it's horrible, right? So in a field creates that little terror atmosphere. Well, my students were oblivious to that. But when you teach text analysis and so on, you want those emotions to be brought to surface because maybe people feel them, but they don't know that. So ChatGPT will help you with that analysis beautifully. and give you 10,000 reasons why the story begins with the word field, in the field. More reasons than we can come up ourselves. So just look here at the aesthetic analysis of text. I use Professor V.S. Ramachandran's categories. And I asked ChatGPT to actually analyze, so I taught it the categories, the Ramachandran's model. I just inserted into ChatGPT, but it knew them. But I just wanted it, because it knows a lot, I just wanted to confirm that we're on the same page. I gave ChatGPT my handwritten analysis of some text, made it beautiful, and so it is. What is in here? I can't see very well. Yeah, talks about, analyzes now the story about grasshopper. Oh, this actually doesn't analyze. This is, so you can analyze the story per se, but here it analyzed the picture. If you don't mind remembering that there was the drawing of the grasshopper with a violin and an end. Well, it took this picture and analyzed it from the perspective of Ramachandran's aesthetic categories. And again, I could have done it myself, but nowhere near this good. It teaches us what else is happening that the computer can see, or AI, and we ourselves with our not so accurate eye might miss. What did it do here? Okay, so we use those aesthetic categories, and now I ask ChatGPT to use the categories of aesthetic experience, which is contrast, grouping. They teach you abstract reasoning, right? Because grouping requires framing. So how would you look at the fable in order to now organize on future preparedness? So disturbance, which is the problem, right? The emotional balance shifts when the grasshopper encounters the ant, whose industriousness contrasts with his own idleness. This interaction introduces cognitive dissonance. That's what the problem is, right? So that's quite amazing how ChatGPT can actually integrate the two. And I have a student who is doing some work in dyslexia and picture reading. It is a common knowledge in Australia that if children cannot process language using the language mechanism, then you give them more exercises to use the language mechanism that they don't have. I don't know how they do that. I just don't know. If I don't have a right arm, doesn't matter how much you ask me or force me to use my right arm, I don't have it. So you have to work around it. So we're using pictures because people with dyslexia don't have just dyslexia issue, they have organizational issue. So we asked ChatGPT to now tell us how working with pictures in a way as we did, using Ramachandran's categories, using the sequence of reading for emotion, mingling them together. So the teacher has... Oh no, please keep recording.
Recording in progress.
Yeah, keep recording. Okay. So so I work with students who are yeah, discussions were flat and all of that. And after all these aesthetics and everything, they generated their websites. And after the discussions of what the point of creating your own website is, you want someone to stop and read it, right? You don't want people to say, flick and go, oh, a child did that, a child, not interesting. And look at this. They produce a story where they actually planned to put Cambodian cultural narratives there and welcome to life. Isn't it amazing? Students who never thought they would ever do that. I thought it was an achievement. Fables, you know what's good to do and what's bad to do. That's what fables are about, right? So I just thought it was amazing. So when it comes to reframing, okay, so what I did actually today in our talk, I hope this is not going to change. So what I did today in my talk was I looked at, these are the sort of strategies that I am sharing with you for reframing literacy, reframing assessment guidelines for greater integrity, reframing sequences of text by building on emotional progression, demonstrating the relevance of the model to text coherence. I didn't show it today, but systemic functional linguistics can't do it. I tested it on the experts, local experts here. They just can't do that. Right, I didn't show it today. Analysis of textual devices, when you cross out the things that can be crossed out and keep the sentence still grammatical. So what are the other elements in the sentence for? Aesthetic activation, linking the reading for emotion sequence with aesthetics in order to produce a summary, demonstrating or reflecting on the reading for emotions potential to impact on learning. So the reading for emotion model helps students bring texts to life through, that's what they can do now. They can, after they've analyzed, they can produce their informed articles, they can produce short films. You can actually ask ChatGPT to turn that aesthetic analysis now into helping you how to orient the camera, how to design a short movie, creative writing, multimodal responses, and so on, deep discussions and cultural transformative interactions, so on. So what do we have here? Let's have a look. So texts are not only structured, they are felt. Theoretical foundation drew on affective neuroscience and inclusive pedagogy. Here the student was present, right, to reframe literacy. Language is positioned as a vehicle for identity, agency, and cultural spiritual continuity. It is a subject in spaces, it is in social spaces, redesigning those spaces, not just participating, but also redesigning. Literacy responds to the challenges. Well, literacy in digital age, what I actually focused mostly on is how to use AI to support that critical participation of our students in order for those participations to be better informed, students being better articulated, students being increasingly self-aware, not just only with their emotions, but also how they express them and how they deal with other people. Pedagogical transformation advocates for relational and emotion embedded literacy. Yes, so create projects that connect students to their environments and beyond, rather than keeping them only writing rehearsals. And literacy has the power to promote social sustainability, equity, and inclusivity in education and society. So these are the sort of social impacts of things done well. Now, this is a little hint. If you assess students who work together on a story or on a project of sorts, and they all produced a single text or a single product, you do not assess them on that. That's an amazing thing to do. You can assess them on explaining to you why the story is created the way it is. So each of them has to now produce an argumentation about the process of analysis they use for the story to look the way it is. And from my experience, I had students who were doing this kind of analysis of the shared product. That analysis is done individually. The product was amazing. And I could tell that some students actually were more active in my class when I was teaching this than other students. Other students were just part of the team but didn't really participate. And those individual assignments reflected that lack of engagement. So I had in one group, which had an amazing article written or something, some students got high distinction and some students failed. And I gave some students, I remember there was one student, I gave him 3 chances to resubmit. Each time he got a fail. He was so disengaged. So when you individualize, you make learning collaborative, but individualize assessment task, right? That's how you can discern now who actually contributed what and what they understood from the process of analysis, from the process of writing, and can tell you a story about what happened. So thank you very much. And I'm truly grateful for this length of time that you have allocated for me. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lion, for the truly illuminating and thought-provoking presentation. And the insight from your keynote have us beyond conventional definitions of literacy, urging us to recognize it not merely as a cognitive function, but as a deeply emotional, cultural, and dynamic process. And you have also powerfully illustrated how language in this digital age actively shapes our identity, empowers individual agency, and is crucial for sustaining our diverse cultural and spiritual health. And it is the perspective that we're sure has sparked many questions and reflections among our audience. And on that note, we will now move on into our question and answer session. So for the dear participants who would like to address question to Dr. Ryan, you may raise your hand and I will give you the chance to ask the question. Okay, we would like to welcome questions now for Dr. Ryan. Okay, we have one participant after for Miss Lisa.
So what is the question?
Okay, thank you very much. I just get thank you for unmute me. I'm Jenny. Thank you for nice presentation. That's really inspiring me. I really enjoyed it, especially your approach to empower ChatGPT in developing teaching strategy. Now back to Indonesia. Here, one common issue is student disciplines. There have been cases where teachers are accused of mistreating students, which makes some teachers hesitant to take action in educating them. As a result, many students, even at the higher education level, struggle even in basic skill like reading and writing. Earlier in your presentation, you mentioned about the internalization of personal and social capabilities. In your opinions, what is the best approach to internalizing moral issue such as integrity, discipline, and responsibility among both in primary or in higher education students? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the question. I was hoping, well, obviously I am not a behavior management psychologist, but as an educator, and I had an excellent mother, I have to say, which helps. In that project from Thailand, which I flagged in the beginning or in the middle of my presentation, when you do project-based learning and that project links students to the broader community, depends on engagement of that community, you make this project present everywhere. Like we were advertising it on the shopping center, on the buildings of a university, everywhere. What was happening, we didn't have misbehaving students, where in fact it was very interesting regarding behavior management. The subject which my student, doctoral student, was teaching was minor, tiny. It was only 2 points worth. And these kids were working until midnight with my students and themselves. They were so engaged. So I think I understand that Cambodia was trying to make similar things, but I'm not sure whether it is ongoing. But I think it's very important to put the school or university and our classes back into the community, rather than being an isolated little room where if you kill someone, it won't matter, nobody noticed. Right? It's extremely important to make these projects move out of the classroom and do something good for the community as well as they are doing something good for the students. Right. So that's why people watch television. That's why people read newspapers, because they think there's a benefit in it for them. And why not reproduce the model? Do something in your engage in projects. AI now is very helpful, enabling students to be increasingly more effective. Put them out there and make not just their success in the subject depend on the project, but also the community depend on the quality of the project. Because our children belong to the society, not just to us. And they misbehave in the society, but the society hides it. Put it out there. Give them motivation to want to shine. That's all I can say. And it was amazing. We had students who were arguing in Thailand, who hated each other, who didn't want to do anything, didn't read anything. We didn't get students who were just amazing achievers. When I came to Konkan University in 2004, which is when these students already finished university, they knew I was the mentor of that subject, of that thesis project. All of them came to meet me, and they said to me, everything we needed to learn to finish our degrees, we learned in that little unit. We underestimate what is possible because we are so anxious and nervous. Thank you. Can I answer Franciscus's question? Okay, so if I can answer the question by Franciscus about AI and Indonesian teachers. I am skeptical of men. It doesn't mean that I will not get married. Right? We're skeptical of lots of things. It doesn't mean we don't do something, right? So it's most of the time we have to remember that what is in the press is produced in order for us to, as a clickbait, or in order to buy newspapers, or in order to watch television, right? So they will be talking about fear. Now, I've been using AI, not from the beginning, but from when it became 3.5, right? So quite like 2 years at least. And you do not understand what AI can do until you actually work with it all the time. And also, I think what I tried to produce today was to explain that AI is a tool, as is my cap. You know, cap was invented first, probably people say in Eastern China, in Eastern Asia, right? It took a lot of years to bring it here. But who would want to drink from the palm of their hand? Would you like to drink tea? Make tea in your hands, right? It's a tool. It's a tool. Now, if teachers do not use AI all the time for their own purposes, they should have some professional development and a good professional development. What I have seen at AsiaCall last year, and I'm looking forward to AsiaCall being this year in Cirebon, actually. But what I saw in Vietnam at AsiaCall conference, I think that a lot of teachers didn't understand, or lecturers who were using AI didn't understand what it is about, they would say they would do research where students were allowed to just ask 3 questions of ChatGPT. 3 questions, like, I begin the day with what's the day today? That's 3 questions is very little. It doesn't actually justify the use of AI. AI is there to clarify and help us conceptualize. It is not there to just produce 3 answers and now we can run with it for the rest of our lives. So teachers and lecturers didn't really understand the role of AI, and they don't have models. And I hope to propose some models today, how when AI is used with models, it improves the professionalism of the teacher, and then it enhances how the teacher then orients the discussion in classroom and identify the things that matter. Without AI, we are limited. Nobody has the quality of language as ChatGPT has. And it's beautiful to utilize the accuracy of analysis by AI and remember that creativity and critical thinking still remains with the human. You can actually, Franciscus, you can actually ask teachers in your courses or in schools, what really are they skeptical of? And what do their views tell you about how they construct teaching and learning? Because very often we're skeptical of the monster that is not there. Okay, thank you, Franciscus. I hope I've answered that. Do we have any other questions? I can't hear Olga.
Okay. Hello, good morning. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for the enlightened presentations and also materials, and of course, really connects to our today's situations in context of teaching and learning process or activities. When we talk about ChatGPT, today's situation, Mom, actually, I have my own experience. I am actually as a writing teacher, and then I sometimes ask my students to write about a particular topic, and the students are able to do it, but they can do it and they can take the materials from ChatGPT because it's easily got from ChatGPT. But the problems here is the students have less of responsibilities and also independencies in doing their assignments, and then they have actually they got a good quality of writing, but the problem is they have lack of comprehensions on what they have already written down. So my question is, in facing this problem, in your own point of view, what can we do, or what can the teachers do in order to face the situation. So the students, even they still use ChatGPT, but their responsibilities and independence still exist. So what do you think about this? Thank you.
We've always known the answer to it. Remember, I don't know about you, but when I was doing my degree in Australia, I had to repeat my education from Poland, or some of it, not all of it. We had exams in Australia. Like they locked us in the room and we had to write in the locked room our assignments, our answer questions and all of that. So there is a need for assignments. There is a need for situations where our students are exposed to situations where they actually use language creatively, like for example, debates. Right? So they write their assignments on an issue and then you put them in the room and you ask them to debate on particular issue for exam, and you sit and you assess them on their spoken language. What will happen, they will be memorizing their text for comprehension. And if they do badly or not, you can actually do a test run in your classroom so they can see where they can improve, and they will work with ChatGPT to improve better. So basically, ChatGPT will be the tutor helping them to articulate themselves better during the debate, which is not now constrained to writing an assignment, but now they have to use the language freely. Right? So that's so basically exams, written exams are good, debates, exposing children, situations where you in classroom play a recording of some, I don't know, discussion on YouTube, some podcast, some report, you choose it. And students in classroom sit and they have to write down what they have heard. Right? It's an assignment written in classroom without ChatGPT. They sit there, it's a listening comprehension. You played them a text and now they have to summarize it, tell you what they heard, and maybe also write their opinion on it if you wish to push it that far. So you have a listening, you have speaking in the debates, you have you can have, well, you don't even have to examine reading, but you can invent similar challenging context for assessing reading and for writing, which is where students are locked in the room and they write. So they also are assessed in writing when they do listening comprehension. So when you play a text and they need to write down what they heard, they are still writing. You can ask them to mind their expressions so that it's actually well written, the text, or you can basically create an exam where they are required to write in a specific genre for a particular purpose, or even rewrite or so if students wrote something during the project, say during the project they wrote an article on the banks buying land from farmers, right? So you can now in classroom they can actually tell you what were the community views, or broaden the topic, and they can still write on the subject that they wrote the article for the Indonesian news network, but now broaden the topic, and they have to produce an article right there during the exam on the same issue, but now from the broader perspective. So we have knowledge, right? We have knowledge about exams. We know about debates. We know about whatever else I mentioned. We've got it all under control. All we have to do is use it, rather than have the defeatist attitude. Oh my God, I can no longer just check their assignments. Well, what's the difference to me whether they wrote that assignment during the exam in classroom or whether they wrote it at home, right? It's still a text I have to assess. So in order to prevent them from using ChatGPT and copying and pasting, I create a situation in classroom where they, on a specific topic that fits one way or another into the context of my teaching and the learning, you just write the text. I'm not sure. Does this explain? Does this help? We just need to be creative rather than continuously worried about the next thing that is coming our way. We need to embrace it, use it for the opportunities it gives us, and then be smarter than the children. Right? If you have a child or a dog or whatever, you've got to be 10 steps ahead because those little beasts will eat you. You know? So you just have to be a little bit smarter and draw on the knowledge we already have. We already have. Okay, Olga, thank you so much, Olga. I hope that explains a little bit. Julian, I think Julian would like to engage too. Can someone let Julian ask the question? He's
Okay, good morning. Good morning, Miss Ania. Thank you so much. Okay, it is a nice presentations that you have already delivered, that you have already presented. I'm interested in PBL issue here. Like you said previously, PBL is a student-centered pedagogy that encourages learners to develop creative and critical thinkings by working collaboratively to solve the real-world problems. However, in many rural areas, especially in Manggarai, teaching English here faces some challenges. Not only the way of teachers teach English in the classrooms, but also in the terms of limited resources and then students' hesitations, lack of teachers' motivations, and lack of parental and community engagements. My questions here. How can parents and community members in rural areas be involved in PBL to bridge the gap between learning and real-world applications? And then the second question here, what creative solutions can be implemented to involve parents who live far away from the school or lack of transportation options? Thank you, Miss.
It's difficult.
Okay.
I've been explaining this thing to my student who happens to have read some activist article, you know, everything is the fault of the Dutch in Indonesia. If the Dutch just brought a Ferrari in 1677, Ferrari and Boeing planes, Indonesia would have been just perfect, right? And I keep explaining to him, it's an activist paper. It's written from nowhere. Things began in Western Europe. In Poland, for example, where I come from, peasants were eating their children, probably up to, I don't know, 18th century or 19th century. Starvation was enormous. Do you think that anybody bothered about reading and writing? Nobody had any literacy skills, right? So that happened, literally the progress in the East started happening after World War II because the technology improved only after, say, 1945. You know, you started having television, the print became easier. You could produce these texts and everything in under 2 seconds, right? As opposed to using the old printing press by Gutenberg from the 15th century. So things are difficult, and expecting that people in Indonesia, which is vast and under-resourced, will be living a life of a middle-class person, say in Florida. It's difficult. So things like transport will be a problem. So we need to ourselves have understanding of it, that change doesn't, even a child takes 9 months to get born, right? Why didn't God just make the child instantly? As soon as you wish, one should pop out, right? Things happen, take time. So we need to understand it. It is all evolution. It's not immediate. So when it comes to English in rural areas, if I were to teach English in a rural area, I would think to myself, why do the student need it? What is it about English? Because English is not grammar and words. The fact that people talk about English as grammar and words, it is really doing so much damage to the field. Talking about emotion is way better. But what is it that English can offer to the rural area? Imagination, how we can actually develop rural area. Imagination about where we can go to improve the rural area. Imagination how we can, right? So you can use English as a vehicle, not of colonization. If I hear this word again, I'm gonna shoot myself. You know, like I'm reading Bourdieu, he's French. Did he colonize me? Right? There's a lot of that. I'm not saying colonization didn't happen, but to now say everything, every time I read Bourdieu, it is colonization. So every time I read any Indonesian paper, is that colonization as well? You know, so I think that we need to be a little bit more critical. So maybe use English in order to bring the world, not just America or whatever, or Australia, bring the world closer. And English is the lingua franca. It's not English. English is the lingua franca, but allows me, who doesn't know Indonesian, and you who do not speak Polish, talk and bring our worlds in touch. So I would think to myself, and it's very hard because teacher education courses do not necessarily prepare teachers for that kind of critical and creative thinking. Just go to your community, take your textbook, and they will have it. No. So I would first ask myself, then I would go to ChatGPT and say, look, ChatGPT, you know everything, right? And it will say, no, I don't know everything, but you can ask me. And then I would say, so what do I do? What, you know, it can offer you resources. It can write resources. It can write entire books. It can write entire drilling exercises for you. You can do anything you wish. But so it's not necessarily that I need textbooks. I don't need textbooks because ChatGPT will spit it out. But basically, what do I need it for? Discuss with ChatGPT most imaginative ways in which I could, and ChatGPT is not very good at it, but it may come up with something. 1% is better than nothing. And then introduce the need for English in that community for those particular reasons, for the fact that it brings to a rural community things that happen in Indonesia, on different islands, in Indonesian neighborhood, so that children in Indonesia do not think that every time they have a toothache, it's because someone wants to kill them. You know, that's what was happening in Poland. My mother lost my brother because someone was telling her, if you go to hospital, they will just, you know, do horrible things to your child. There's a lot of that kind of old thinking. So we don't use English in order to enlighten through English, but we use it as a lingua franca to bring diversity in order to expand the horizons and imagination of the children living in conditions otherwise limited. I also suggest that people, that is a job of language teaching professionals to look for scholars that can support those children in ways that are simple. So for example, I have a student in Sri Lanka. She can't teach in Australia. She can't go back to Sri Lanka to teach there because it's complicated. I mean, she will go there to do a project, but she can't teach because she's not connected to any schools. So she can't do experiment in Australia because she doesn't have a teacher qualifications. She is not connected to any school in Sri Lanka. All of that she needs to finish her master thesis, which is small and compact. So Professor Julian has just a system for her. My job is to create a conceptual change in the student, but then Professor Lyon invented a system. All it takes is to do, I think, 2 hours per week or something, which improves your proficiency, improves your fluency, improves your pronunciation, right? Just little mechanical system which looks like a drill but ain't a drill. Based on neuroscience, based on a lot of research. So you can utilize those systems as an add-on to your other teaching because they generate success. All of a sudden, students feel that they can understand, they're better at listening to English. Not only that, it improves their fluency. So they feel success as they are actually succeeding. And it doesn't take much from the teachers, the system running online. So you can invent systems like this, but think for yourself what's the point of teaching English in rural area? In what aspects can I actually use English as a lingua franca to develop imagination, to develop visions, to improve the children's horizons? Because the point of education, or even of teaching English, as the Australian curriculum says quite correctly, the point of learning any discipline is not to learn the discipline, is to learn about yourself and about the world and how you are in it. How much being, how much capacity to act in the world do you have? So how broad are your horizons, which is the cultural one, and what systems do you utilize to analyze, to synthesize, to summarize, right? To use those cognitive processes to help you reflect on the way you are in the big world. Now, obviously, it's much easier for children to reduce themselves to zero and think I'm nobody and I don't really care. But that's not the point of education. The point of being a teacher is actually to overcome that this defeatist attitude in those who have it. And I'm not saying it's easy. We are intellectuals. When Stalin took over, well, when the communists, the Bolsheviks took over Russia, and when they took over Ukraine, those areas, right? The first thing they did, they killed teachers. They've murdered all the teachers because the teachers were seen as the intellectual class, those who remember how to think, those who remember tradition, those who have values, those who carry the tradition for 2 million years, from when we were Homo erectus till today. They have it in them. They studied. They wanted to start from zero. If you start from zero, you start with what? In a cave? I don't know. The thing is, we are intellectuals. Our job is to think, and our job is to experience those challenges and to not find the solution to those challenges, but to work with those challenges. Thank you. I think we have Adrianus, who is next in the queue. Adrianus, can someone let Adrianus ask his question? Janice, you may need to unmute your system. Yeah, I don't know. Someone has to let you in. I can't hear you, Janice. You are muted. You have muted yourself.
Cek, sabar. Check. Check. Check.
Thank you so much. I cannot hear you very well, but I think you said that's the end of the session. Thank you so much.
So before parts, we would like to show our sincere appreciation through showing you the virtual certificate of appreciation. And we will now share it on the screen.
Oh, thank you.
So this certificate acknowledges your esteemed participation and significant contribution to our fifth International Conference on Humanities, Education, Language, and Cultures. So once again, thank you so much, Dr. Lyon, for sharing your expertise and for making this conference a success.
Thank you once again.
So now I would like to give back the session to our Master of Ceremony, Mr. Justus Santu.
Well, again, thank you profoundly to our distinguished keynote speaker, Dr. Anita Lyon, for that compelling presentation, and to our moderator, Mr. Indra Susanto, for expertly managing this session. Ladies and gentlemen, let us continue our final plenary session, keynote session 4. Guiding the session will be our moderator, Dr. Dedi Suleman. Dr. Suleman will introduce our final keynote speaker for the conference. To Mr. Dedi Suleman, please proceed.
Hello, good morning, Dr. Cynthia.
Good morning.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, distinguished keynote speakers, presenters, and esteemed participants, of the fifth ICHELAC held by Indonesian Catholic University of St. Paul Ruteng. It is truly an honor for me to serve as your moderator for this important session. I hope you've been having a rich and engaging experience throughout the conference. At this moment, we are privileged to welcome our fourth keynote speaker, a respected scholar and practitioner whose career beautifully embodies the bridge between rigorous academic inquiry and deep social commitment. Please allow me to introduce Dr. Cynthia Embido Vigino. And would it be okay if I call you Dr. Cynthia for short? Yeah, okay, thank you. Dr. Cynthia brings with her over 20 years of experience in academic research, grassroots organizing, and transformative development work. She holds deep expertise in gender justice, agrarian reform, indigenous people's rights, and participatory development, enriched by her interdisciplinary background in development studies, political science, and transformative disciplines. She has contributed significantly as a lecturer and postdoctoral researcher in prominent institutions, including in Leiden University, Erasmus University Rotterdam, Princeton University, and Radboud University, and has supervised more than 100 students' theses. Currently, she serves as a lecturer at Leiden University in the Department of International Relations and Political Science, and is actively engaged in postdoctoral and consultancy roles in areas such as climate justice, food sovereignty, feminism, and civic innovation. Ladies and gentlemen, today, Dr. Cynthia will deliver a keynote entitled The Digital Transformation and Humanities Education. Okay, I repeat, the digital transformation and humanities education. This keynote invites us to reflect on how tradition and innovation can work together in the field of humanities, especially in the fast-moving digital age. Dr. Cynthia will explore how digital tools can expand access to education, boost student engagement, and also open up knowledge to more people. But at the same time, she reminds us to be mindful of the challenges like digital inequality and ethical concerns that come with this transformation. Her talk encourages us to think critically about how we use technology so that it supports rather than weakens the core values of humanistic education. So, ladies and gentlemen, before we begin, let me briefly explain the flow of this keynote session. Keynote presentation, 40 minutes by Dr. Cynthia, 40 minutes, yeah. And question and answer session, 15 minutes, where participants are welcome to ask questions via the Q&A box or chat box or directly. And then concluding remarks and key takeaways, 5 minutes by me or by moderator. And certificate of appreciation awarding, yes, to formally thank to our keynote speaker. So without further ado, I now invite Dr. Cynthia Embido Vigino to take the virtual floor. Dr. Cynthia, the screen is yours.
Thank you. Good morning, distinguished colleagues, fellow students, fellow educators, scholars, guests, and all participants of the 5th International Conference on Humanity, Education, Language, and Culture 2025. It is both an honor and a privilege to speak with you today about one of the most consequential shifts facing education in the 21st century, the digital transformation of education. In this case, humanities education or humanities discipline. We stand at a crossroads where tradition meets innovation, where centuries-old humanistic inquiry must now navigate a landscape increasingly shaped by algorithms, multimedia, and global connectivity. The digital era has not merely knocked on the doors of the humanities, it has flung them wide and open, presenting us with profound opportunities and complex
Hello,
challenges.
Dr. Cynthia. I'm sorry.
Yes.
Can
Yes.
you share your screen?
What is it?
Your material of
Oh no, I don't have
okay, you can
material to
share
share.
screen. Ah,
I don't have material to share. I'm just reading
yeah,
my
okay.
materials.
Okay, right. Thank you. Yeah, okay, go on, Dr. Cynthia.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, okay. Go on.
Okay, so I didn't I was not informed that I can share materials to share with you, but I'm just reading this and later I can share it to the participants, to you.
Okay, thank you.
Is it okay?
Yeah, okay.
Okay. Okay, so let me continue. So the digital era has not merely knocked on the doors of the humanities, it has flung them wide open, presenting us with profound opportunities and complex challenges. As we explore this dynamic terrain, we are called to reimagine what it means to teach, learn, and conduct scholarship in disciplines that have long cherished reflection, interpretation, and critical dialogue. We come together here in this timely conference with a shared vision, a vision that recognizes the transformative power of education, the richness of our languages and cultures, and the enduring relevance of our spiritual and humanistic values, even and especially in the digital age. The theme of this conference, and I quote, transforming humanities education through technology, language, cultural and spiritual values to promote sustainable societies in the digital age, end of quote, could not be more timely or crucial. We find ourselves at a pivotal moment in history, a moment when rapid technological advances are reshaping our societies, classrooms, and even our sense of self and community, which is sometimes exciting, but sometimes overwhelming. In this fast-paced digital era, we are called not to adapt, but also to lead and guide this transformation with wisdom, empathy, cultural sensitivity, and sustainability in mind. Our collective task is not simply to integrate technology into education, but to ensure that doing so, we do not lose the essence of what it means to be human. Let us begin by acknowledging the significant transformation taking place in our classrooms. Once, the cornerstone of humanities instruction, the traditional lecture is being reshaped, sometimes radically, by digital tools that enhance interactivity, personalization, and engagement. Online learning, blended classrooms, augmented and virtual reality, and collaborative platforms have emerged as new pedagogical norms. During the COVID-19 pandemic, many of us witnessed firsthand how necessity spurred innovation. Educators adapted rapidly, often heroically, even as we confronted weaknesses in digital infrastructure and disparities in access. And yet, with change comes promise. Digital learning opens doors to wider accessibility. Students in remote or underserved areas can now engage with the same texts, voices, and ideas as their peers in urban centers. Digital platforms foster intergenerational and cross-cultural conversations, enriching the learning experience and cultivating a more connected, global understanding of human culture. However, we must not mistake access to comprehension or interactivity for depth. As we embrace technology, we must cultivate digital literacy, ensuring that the students and educators can critically evaluate, navigate, and contribute meaningfully to the digital landscape. Digital technologies are not just changing how we teach, they are transforming how students engage with content. Through multimedia storytelling, data visualization, immersive simulation, and artificial intelligence, we can offer students new pathways to understand complex ideas in literature, history, philosophy, and the arts. Imagine a student exploring an ancient text alongside an augmented reality recreation of the society in which it was written, or consider the possibilities of digital archives and collaborative annotation platforms that enable a deeper shared experience of a literary work. These are enhancements and fundamentally new ways of thinking and learning, tools that encourage critical analysis, creativity, and interdisciplinary exploration. But they must be thoughtfully implemented. Superficial engagement is risky without pedagogical grounding, replacing thoughtful inquiry with flashy but shallow experiences. One of the digital age's most revolutionary impacts has been the democratization of knowledge, an ongoing transformation that is reshaping how we learn, research, and engage with information. Where once access to high-quality educational materials and scholarly content was limited to those affiliated with well-funded institutions or able to afford expensive textbooks and journal subscriptions, we are now witnessing a shift towards open access and global participation. Open educational resources, digitized archives, and publicly funded digital initiatives are at the forefront of this shift. These tools and platforms are breaking down long-standing barriers by making knowledge more accessible and inclusive than ever before. From free online courses offered by prestigious universities to historical archives made available to the public through national libraries, the boundaries that once separated learners from information are steadily dissolving. Institutions and organizations worldwide are contributing to this transformation. Academic publishers, universities, and research institutes are increasingly releasing vast collections of scholarly content under open licenses. For example, large datasets are now freely available from global institutions such as the United Nations, the World Bank, and the OECD. This allows independent researchers, policymakers, and students to access high-quality data that once difficult to obtain. Meanwhile, platforms, for example, Google Scholar, have revolutionized the search for academic literature. Users can explore a vast digital landscape of peer-reviewed articles, theses, books, and conference papers with a single click. This immediacy and breadth of access empower individuals to engage with academic discourse regardless of geographical or economic limitations. However, this expanded access also comes with new responsibilities. The sheer volume of available information can be overwhelming, and not all sources uphold rigorous academic standards. Predatory journals, misinformation, and unverified data lurk in the same digital space as credible research. Therefore, users must approach open knowledge critically and be equipped with the digital literacy skills necessary to discern reliable sources from questionable ones. The democratization of knowledge should not mean the dilution of quality or the erosion of scholarship trust. Importantly, this new knowledge landscape is changing how people access information and reshaping the role of educators and institutions. Educators are no longer the sole gatekeepers of knowledge, and instead, they are being called to act as facilitators, curators, and co-learners in a dynamic and participatory educational ecosystem. This shift encourages more collaborative, interdisciplinary, and learner-driven models of education, where the boundaries between teacher and student, expert and novice are more fluid and responsive. In essence, the digital democratization of knowledge is not just about access, it is about empowerment. It invites students, researchers, and the broader public to participate actively in producing and applying knowledge. It fosters a more informed, critically engaged, and culturally connected society, and it challenges traditional paradigms of education, urging us to rethink how we teach, learn, and build communities of inquiry in an increasingly connected world. Yet, as we celebrate these remarkable advancements, it is equally important to acknowledge and to confront the real and pressing challenges accompanying them. First and foremost, not all students or educators have the digital literacy and technological fluency required to engage fully and benefit from these new learning environments. The rapid shift to digital tools and platforms has in many cases outpaced the ability of individuals to adapt, leaving some at a disadvantage and widening the gap between the digitally proficient and those still struggling to acquire these essential skills. Moreover, infrastructure disparities and technological gaps remain significant barriers to equitable access. Reliable internet connectivity, access to modern devices, and a stable electricity remain luxuries rather than standard provisions in many parts of the world. These challenges are particularly pronounced in marginalized and underserved communities, where schools may lack the basic technological infrastructure to support even the most fundamental digital learning experiences. This is especially critical in developing countries, where systemic issues such as poverty, limited governmental support, and regional inequalities further exacerbate the digital divide. As a result, while some students benefit from immersive, tech-enhanced education, others continue to be left behind, creating a two-tiered system of learning that threatens to deepen existing educational and socioeconomic disparities. Moreover, the sheer volume of information at our fingertips can often overwhelm rather than enlighten. While digitalization and the advent of artificial intelligence have undeniably transformed the landscape of knowledge production and dissemination, this transformation has not been without controversy. For some, these innovations signal a new intellectual renaissance, an era marked by unprecedented access, efficiency, and interdisciplinary potential. For others, however, they represent a dilution of traditional scholarly rigor, where speed and surface level engagement threaten to eclipse depth, nuance, and critical inquiry. Key questions remain unresolved, particularly around what constitutes academic rigor in an age increasingly driven by algorithms and automation. The issue of inclusivity also comes to the fore. Who gets to participate in this digital turn, and whose voices are amplified or silenced by the tools we adapt? Equally pressing is the question of how digital scholarship is recognized and valued within academic institutions, many of which still adhere to systems of evaluation that may not fully capture the scope or impact of digital work. As we continue integrating digital methodologies into scholarly practice, it is crucial to remain critically vigilant about the ethical implications of these shifts. Concerns such as data privacy, algorithmic bias, and surveillance must be addressed head-on. Additionally, there is a real danger that in our efforts to quantify and analyze, we might inadvertently reduce rich, complex, cultural artifacts to mere datasets, stripping them of their context, meaning, and humanity. Thus, striking a balance between technological innovation and ethical, thoughtful scholarship is essential to harness digital tools' benefits without compromising the humanities' integrity. So, where do we go from here? First, we must invest in digital literacy, not just as a technical skill, but as a cornerstone of humanistic education. We must equip students and educators alike to engage critically with technology, ask hard questions, and navigate the digital world with ethical awareness and intellectual rigor. Second, we must build pedagogies that blend the best of the old and the new, preserving the depth, nuance, and critical inquiry that define the humanities while embracing the tools that can enhance and expand our reach. Third, we must recognize and reward innovation in scholarship, reimagining how we evaluate academic contributions in a world where knowledge is increasingly shared, collaborative, and digital. Finally, we must reaffirm the value of the humanities, not as relics of the past, but as vital instruments for understanding the present and shaping the future. In a time of rapid technological change, the humanities provide a critical lens we need to examine what it means to be human. This conference's commitment to interdisciplinary dialogue is a beacon. Together, researchers, educators, students, policymakers, and community leaders, we can reimagine education as a holistic, inclusive force that uplifts minds and hearts. Let us continue learning from one another, exchange ideas and best practices, and nurture a global academic network committed to social justice, human dignity, and a sustainable society, where both human and non-human creatures thrive and are cared for to sustain the life and well-being of the Earth's ecosystem while maximizing technological advancement. Let us move forward with both boldness and care. Let us celebrate the transformative power of digital tools while remaining anchored in the values that have long defined social science disciplines. And let us work together across institutions, disciplines, and borders to ensure that the digital transformation of humanities education enriches rather than diminishes our shared pursuit of knowledge, culture, understanding, and a better society for all. Before closing, let me express my deepest appreciation to Bishop Dr. Maximus Rigos for inviting me to this conference, also to Dr. Gabriel Freddy Daar, the organizer, and the rest of the conference organizers, and all of you who contribute your time, scholarship, and vision. May this conference not only enrich our minds, but also inspire in our institutions, communities, and world. Let's be reminded that the true purpose of education is not only to inform, but also to transform. And in that transformation lies the promise of a more just, compassionate, and sustainable future. Thank you. Maraming salamat po. Terima kasih. Terima kasih. Thank you, Livel. Good morning.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Cynthia. Yeah, okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Cynthia, for that insightful and inspiring presentation. And there are some keywords that you present to us for today about the digital transformation. Yes, you talk about digital transformation, humanities education, students engagement, and also technological gaps. Yeah, such as access divide, usage divide, and also the quality of use gap. So now we open the floor for the question. If the participants have any questions, kindly you can type them in the chat box, or you can raise your hand to speak. Yeah, and we will try to accommodate as many as time allows. So I give time to participants to ask question to Dr. Cynthia.
Yeah. Yes, there are some questions. So good to engage with each other. So I don't know who, maybe you can facilitate who's the first.
Yeah, a question from
I can see 4 hands.
Freddy Daar in chat box. Okay,
I can see.
Thank you, Dr. Cynthia, for insightful material. What strategies would you recommend for maintaining depth, ethical awareness, and cultural sensitivity in this increasingly digitized academic landscape? Is the question from Mr. Freddy Dar in chat box.
Okay, so the question is about how can we ensure the academic depth? Okay, so well, as educators, we have old, and now we have new ways of maintaining the academic depth. So in relation to this digital age, one of the practices that we do to maintain academic depth is, for example, because I teach a lot of thesis students. That's what I do in the Netherlands right now. I'm teaching bachelor students who are almost graduating, and so therefore they have to do their thesis. And so one of course, one of the it's very, in our universities, it's very still they are still very strict to the rules that, for example, the students cannot use AI in doing their materials, yeah, so their thesis or their assignments like essays and all sorts of writing. So how can we do it? Is also by using digital tools like, for example, the Turnitin tool, yeah. So, but of course, you cannot see deeply how students are not using actually the digital technology to be able to write their materials, right? So that's why there are ways as well of doing it. For me, as a supervisor of many thesis students, I can already gauge what is the capacity of the students when they are writing their own materials. Then, you know, when they are writing it by using AI, for example. So you can gauge it because, of course, you are also gauging it by giving them an assignments all throughout of their courses, right? So you give them, for example, reflection papers or small or short essays And so therefore, you are already seeing how students write. Yeah. So because you are following their process of learning. And so therefore, if suddenly they write like a perfect essay, then you will already doubt, for example, that they are using an AI, for example. Yeah. So therefore, in one university, for example, in what where I teach, one of the possibility that we ensure that the students are really also being open to what they use in AI, we are also asking them to declare what kind of AI they use and why they use it. Yeah. So for example, if they use for example, some of students are using Grammarly, for example. Yeah. So it's an app um, to correct your grammar. Yeah. So therefore, the students will already tell firsthand. They will declare that they use Grammarly so that they can have a grammar help. Yeah. So there are many different tools, and so there are many of these different tools. By making sure that the students are declaring what they use and why they use the app, then you can already gauge that actually the students are using the app and they are open about it. Yeah. But also, of course, as you teach these students, of course, you can still see, because some students, for example, can be very like they are not careful in using AI, and then you can see as well that they are using, for example, wrong literature. Yeah, so they can actually check that these are AI developed material, because you will see that the authors that they are using is actually not correct or not non-existence, right? So there are many ways. So therefore, to ensure the depth of the writing of the students, you still also engage, apart from making sure that they are not relying on on the AI in writing their materials. You also make sure that you have the process of engaging them and monitoring their process, like weekly, for example, weekly meeting and weekly submission of their work. And so therefore you see that they are actually doing the writing by themselves. Yeah. Even if they use a digital app, you can still see how they develop their questions, their problem definition, and even the materials or the literature review that they are using, if they are engaging actually the literature that the university uses for teaching or not. So that's one way of maintaining the academic depth of the students while they are writing their essays or their assignments, example, the thesis. I hope it answers your question.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Cynthia. Okay, next, I give a chance to Pak Edwin from Undiksa. You can raise your question directly to Dr. Cynthia. Okay, screen is yours. Pak Edwin. Pak Edwin. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity goes to me. Ms. Cynthia, I'm so impressed with your presentation this morning, and I really enjoy what you are presenting. In this case, I would like to ask you a question. Based on the in this era that the lifespan of knowledge was measured in decades. I mean, in the past, that the lifespan of the knowledge was measured in decades. But now, the lifespan of the knowledge is measured in months or sometimes in years, and the lifespan of knowledge becomes shortened. And at the other side, knowledge and information growing exponentially. That one research said that the information and knowledge doubling in 18 months. And my question is, do you agree that the role of teacher shifting to like knowledge provider into a curator of knowledge in big data era?
Thank you for that question. That's very important question. Yeah, indeed, in many ways, the information, because of the vast informations that we have, it can be that the information can be like short. The lifespan of the information can be shortened, right? But in a way, because of so many informations as well, it can also. That's why we have to be, as educators, we have to be critical. Not only, of course, as curators, it can be also, of course, one role, as I also mentioned. We can also be as a curator of the information and in our teaching and the knowledge exploration. But of course, using all this short information, or like very quick information, and in this age, with our wisdom as well as teachers, we also engage it with the historical knowledge that we have, right? So it's important. That's why it's important to like combine the old and the new knowledge. Of course, the students for now, especially because, especially the younger ones, because they are like born in a very quick information, and even they don't have anymore the will of like really going deeper into the news, and then like going deeper on the context of the news, for example, or the information. That means that as teachers, we really have the challenge of how we engage our students on really bringing them again into thinking critically of what informations they are encountering in daily basis, or even in a second basis. Yeah? So the young ones are very, 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 very good in following TikTok, for example, or all these short reels that really captures their minds, but not necessarily giving like deep information, right? So as teachers, as parents, as elders, all generations, I guess this is the challenge for us to really also engage, especially in our classrooms, engage these students to really think critically of the information that they get on a timely or even seconds basis of informations. So much informations, but so much also of misinformations, for example. Yeah. So we have to inculcate, we have to, in your word, curate the information that they get. Yeah, on a time basis, on how we can really like encourage the students or the young ones to be able to be critical of the information that they get on their daily lives. So I guess as teachers, as scholars, we still have to really engage what are the informations that can really be helping the young generations, especially on how they can be very critical of the informations that they get on their like in one click. Yeah. So yeah, it's also a challenge for us in the classrooms, how we encourage our students to really read, for example, articles, the real news. Yeah, not only the TikTok or all these short reels information. So I hope it answers your question.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Cynthia. Next, I give chance to Pak Adrian. You can raise your question directly to Dr. Cynthia. Yeah, Pak Adrian.
Okay.
Okay, Pak Adrian, please address your question directly to Dr. Cynthia.
Thank you, Dr. Cynthia. Is my voice clear enough? Hello?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. My question is aligned with another questions previously addressed by Mr. Edwin. Concerning on the teacher's role in the challenge under the challenge of AI roles to because you are talking about humanity, right? Humanism. So is it really there is a threat to dehumanize of people's life due to the use of artificial intelligence tools nowadays? It is the first one, and the second one is the role of the teachers or lecturers in many areas. I think there is nothing to be avoid or to be a way of using such kind of technologies in our learning process, especially in language learning, of course. I remember what Holiday in her research on systemic functional linguistics on how teachers' roles which cannot be replaced by the technology, whatever it is. Previously, there is a talk, the discussion about the AI roles. Especially I learned about such systemic functional linguistics and how teachers can teach problem-based by using functional problem-based, also functional genre-based also to teach the students, and it is not it cannot be done by the AI, right? Especially the teacher's role of giving examples from his life or her life themselves. Okay, so I think in this perspective, I agree with this statement. Every era has its people, and every people has their era, right? So the challenges always happen to human life, but the problem is how to control it in our mind. So according to your perspective, Prof. Cynthia, what do you think about the treatment of the dehumanized due to the role of overwhelming role of the tools on today's learning process? Thank you very much. I do hope that is clear enough. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for the question. Yeah, so the role of digital era to dehumanize or not, if I get it right, or so there I can answer your question in a way that your question is that if the use of the digital era in this age, it can actually dehumanize or not dehumanizing, right? And how can we and what are the roles of the teachers in this in this manner? Well, I agree with you that actually there are in different eras, of course. Now is a digital era, but I agree with you that actually our role as teachers cannot be comparable with the digital the digital technologies. Yeah, it cannot be not surpassed, but we still have the role as teachers, as scholars in this digital era. But indeed, we cannot avoid anymore not using the digital technologies because it's there. In fact, as is in my speech, it can empower. Yeah, the technologies can really empower on how we teach in at schools with the students, but also it can also indeed have the negative side. Yeah, so and one aspect of the negative side is indeed, for example, I will just think of the positives, the negative side of like dehumanizing in a way that, of course, one way that I can think of is in terms of dehumanizing is if we don't have anymore the ethics that guides us in using the technology, for example. So how do we ensure how do we ensure that we use the technology in a way that we preserve the human dignities? Yeah. So we can cite many examples on how technology can be dehumanizing. For example, we know that there are many information that can really, for example, encourage young people to be. So I'm thinking, for example, the pornographies. Yeah. So there's so much pornographies already in this digital era, where even the young, very young generation are already exposed to these pornographies because it doesn't anymore. There's no rule on who can access this information and who cannot. Yeah. So in that way, it already is dehumanizing the generation that can access, for example, all this pornographic, very bad information in because of the technology. Yeah. So so it really creates it disassociate the ethics, the human integrity without the rule that can actually divide what is the information that is good for whom and how. But of course, because the technology, we can't control it because there's no rule, then therefore it really creates a lot of negative impact to particular sectors, for example. Yeah. So there are also other ways of using digital technology. For example, during elections, for example. Yeah. So, and I guess you also know it in Indonesia, even in the Philippines, we experience it, that the technology is used to be able to really malign or tarnish the integrity of particular candidates, yeah, even if they are the good candidates. And the bad candidates are the one who are making or having the space to really have to influence the people, right? Because they have more money, they have more power to use the technology. And so therefore they have further reach. Yeah, and so therefore they win the election using only the technology, right? Even if they are not the good candidates, for example. So we can gauge a lot of many, like I mean, I can give a lot of many experiences, but these are like some of the examples where the dehumanization is entering if the ethics is not considered, if the humanistic values are not considered in using technology. Yeah, but on the other hand, there are positive usage of the role of the digital technology in relation to how as well we can counter this, let's say, evil or disinformation or like unethical and not critical ways of using technology. We can also counter, for example, yeah. So, for example, if we have more money as well, then we can also create and use the tools, the apps, and all these digital technologies to be able to also propagate, to counter the negativity rather than to push for positive values as well. So, for example, if we create calls for justice or calls for climate adaptation and mitigation and all the other issues that we are pushing to be able to create some transformation in our society, we can also use the technology, of course. Yeah. So it's the manner of how we actually use the digital technology to be able to create either bad or a good society, or either bad or a good information. So it's, and of course, we as educators, we as human, are still, of course, the one who can control it. And I guess the challenge here is, how are we going to use the technology to be able to propagate or to be able to pursue towards a better society rather than a bad society? So yeah, so I guess I can only answer in that way. Of course, it's challenging because, again, of course, the power in terms of access to technology, on how we can build infrastructure, on how we create, to communicate the values on using technologies. It could start from everywhere, yeah. So even at our home, even at our classrooms, and even a broader society, we can create, we can be the change, we can be the agent of change to be able to control the negative aspects of the technology rather than, or otherwise pursue how to use the technology for better. So I hope I answer your question.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Dr. Cynthia. Yes, because of time limitation, we still have one questioners from Pak Tobias. I give chance to Pak Tobias to address your question directly to Dr. Cynthia.
Sure.
Okay, Pak Tobias.
Hello, Dr. Cynthia.
Hi, Tobias.
Yeah, it's a great presentation from you. But what you have presented lead us to paradoxal situations. I have simple questions to you, but I hope that you can answer a little bit clear to discern the situation. This era is what we call or characterized by volatility and uncertainty. And it is related to the use of AI. And what happens if, for example, in Indonesia, the policy not restrict but prohibit using AI in teaching learning context. What's your comment about that?
The prohibition.
Yes. Yeah, it may happen in your country, in Philippines. If someday the governments prohibit using AI for profound reasons in relations to education, their education's quality. Yeah. What's your comment about that?
I guess even the government cannot anymore prevent, the proliferation of the AI, I mean the digital use. But in case of, it may, because there are of course cases where technology is prevented in a way, but it's not only in a way. For example, let's remember, for example, in the US, the TikTok at some point was not anymore allowed, right? So for political reasons, right? So it was prevented. But of course, there are many different apps that people can use, right? So it's not only TikTok. There are so many. So therefore, we can only disallow some, some particular app, for example, but not necessarily all the digital and technological access, right? For example, in Russia, so of course it's also not allowed to for people. So the people there, they cannot also get information from other sources, except for example, the news from the Russian government. So not other news, but only Russian government. But of course, we are not. It's not also maybe generally, or generally the people are only getting information from the television because other televisions are not allowed. But I guess they are still cannot disallow all that digital access from people, right? So, but it's just a matter of what, I guess it's still is, it boils down to what the people will believe in the information, right? So even if they get information in various ways, for example, but it ends up to how the individual or like a group of people can actually engage or would want to engage with the information. Either they believe the information without questioning, right? Or they get the information and ask hard questions about the information. And so therefore lead to, using again the technology to be able to get and go deeper and contextualize the information, for example. And so therefore create more critical analysis of the information rather than just take the information and believe the information and therefore that's it. Keep quiet and that's the information that we got, and so therefore that's the truth. So it ends up again on how the individuals and how we propagate, for example, as educators to our students, on how we engage the informations that we get, whether it's small information, short information, real information on our daily basis, daily experiences. So we need to really propagate as educators how to think critically of whatever information we get, whether it's information from television or from apps like TikTok and all this short information that we get. I guess because we as educators, we have the space to be able to talk to our students, small ones, from small ones to the universities. The critical thinking is very, very important, especially in this digital age, because everybody can just create information, but how this information is, like, how do we process this information is very, very important.
Hello, Dr. Cynthia.
Yeah.
So you agree that without using advancement technology, the quality of education will be not decreasing, right?
I did not get your last point, that the use of technology will not decrease.
Without using advanced technology like artificial intelligence under discussions,
Yeah.
will be not decreasing our education quality, because human role is the main. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, we can use the tools. Yeah, it's tools, but still, it's us as human. We cannot be replaced by the tools. Tools are still
But it's going
operated
to be
by
replaced
humans.
by tools, Dr. Cynthia.
It's
going to be replaced by tools in next centuries.
No, I don't think
It cannot
so.
be limited. Yeah.
No, I don't think so. So your technology are there, but still the technology is run by humans, right? So it cannot be replaced. We still have huge role in how we actually use the technology. Technology are only tools to be able for the human to, like, it's not replacing us, I believe.
So it's debatable.
Yeah, I mean, it's not. No, it's debatable. Yeah, that's true. But I don't believe that the tools are replacing us. It will never replace us, because we have the role of the technology will not say with feeling. Yeah. The technology can only give us information, but how the humanity is reacting to this information is still on us as humans.
Okay. Yeah.
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 So I guess the word of, like, technology is replacing us is totally debatable, because it's not replacing us, but it's a tool that can be used, and the question is how we engage with the tools.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Thank
Yeah.
you, Dr. Cynthia. Thank you, Pak Tobi.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you to Dr. Cynthia, and thank you very much all who participated in the discussion. It's very interesting. And to conclude, Dr. Cynthia has reminded us, yes, that while the digital era poses real challenges for humanistic disciplines, it also opens up bold and beautiful possibilities for inclusion, creativity, and ethical global citizenship. We are challenged to ensure that digital transformation does not dilute or does not destroy, but rather deepens our humanistic inquiry, empowering both educators and learners to co-create a future that is just, ethical, and inclusive. So once again, thank you very much, Dr. Cynthia, and all participants who participated in the discussion. And the last section of this session, certificate awarding. Yes, at this point, Dr. Cynthia, on behalf of the organizing committee of the fifth ICHELAC 2025, I am honored to present this certificate of appreciation to you, Dr. Cynthia, in recognition of your powerful keynote address and meaningful contribution to our conference.
Thank you.
Okay, good. Okay, thank you once again, Dr. Cynthia, and thank you, dear participants, for your presence and engagement. Please stay with us as we move on to the next exciting part of our conference.
Ladies and gentlemen, our heartfelt thanks to our esteemed keynote speaker, Dr. Cynthia Mbido Bajeno, PhD, for sharing her invaluable insight, and to our moderator, Dr. Dedi Soleman, for leading the session effectively. We have now concluded all the keynote presentations for ICHELAC 2025. Let's give a virtual round of applause for all our distinguished keynote speakers and moderators. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished participants, we will now adjourn for like 25 minutes break. Please use this time to rest and prepare for the afternoon sessions. The parallel sessions will resume today at 1 p.m. 13.00 waktu Indonesia Tengah in the designated room, breakout rooms. Please refer to the schedule for your room assignments. Thank you very much for your participation. See you at 1 p.m. God bless you. Have a nice day.